Hola a todos, soy Michael y estoy aquí con otro video de repaso de gramática española. Hi everyone, it's me Michael and I'm here with another video which is a revision of a topic of Spanish grammar. And today we're going to be revising the simple past. So I'll start off with what the simple past is, what it's used for, and then I'll have a look at the regular forms for AR, ER and IR verbs. And in another video, I'll look at some irregular forms. Okay, so I'm going to start off with what the simple past is. Now, Spanish, like English, has two main past tenses. Okay, in Spanish there are other ones besides the ones in English, but in both languages we have two main past tenses that are used a lot in everyday communication. So let's start with English first of all. So in English we have two past tenses. We have the one where you say I have done something, and that have always kind of brings a relation to the present. So it's like, I have done something until now. For example, I have visited Barcelona 3 times. Okay, now that means until now I have visited Barcelona. But, you know, that could change in the future. I could visit again. That tense also exists in Spanish, and there are a few different ways to express it, but one of the most common ones is the same way as it is in English. We use a form of the verb have, haber, followed by the past participle. So, for example, I have visited would be he visitado. Okay. The other main past tense that's used is used to describe when you did something, and it's usually that you did something at a specific time. That time is now finished and the action is now finished. So it's completely in the past with no real relation to the present. So for example, in my earlier example, I said, I have visited Barcelona 3 times. And in this other tense, we would say, I visited Barcelona last year. Okay, last year is finished. And so is the action of visiting Barcelona. So because of that, we're using this tense, and it's known as the simple past tense because it's about actions that are completed, and put quite simply, they're finished, over with. There are other names for this tense as well, like the preterite, or in Spanish, the pretérito. But as long as you think about it, that it's more the equivalent of did something in English rather than have done something, that will kind of help you as well. Okay. The other thing about this tense is rather like the present tense, we start with the stem, and the stem is just taking each of the infinitives, AR, ER and IR, and then removing the last 2 letters. And then onto that, we add our endings. So that's the main thing about this simple past tense. And as I said, it's used to describe things that are already finished, already completed. Each of these past tenses, the present perfect, that's the one that uses have, and the simple past, they kind of have their own trigger phrases. So as soon as you hear one of those trigger phrases, you know which one you have to use, in general. The trigger phrases for the simple past, that's the one that kind of means did something, the one we're focusing on today. So we're focusing on times that are completed, okay? So we wouldn't use it with today, for example, because today is still happening. We could, however, use it with yesterday. Okay, so yesterday is totally finished, ayer. So we could, in Spanish, use the simple past with ayer. Anything that contains last. Okay, so last week, last month, last year. La semana pasada, el mes pasado, el año pasado. So these are specific times, all of which are completed, so we can use this tense. Okay. There are other trigger expressions, but those are kind of the key ones. So any time that's completely finished. A year, for example. So I was born in 1984. 1984. That year is finished, absolutely completed, so we would use the simple past of the verb born. The verb born in Spanish is nacer. It's just one word, so it's not like English to be born. And in the past tense, it's nací. So if I wanted to say I was born in 1984, I would say nací, N-A-C-I, nací, with the accent on the I, en 1984, 1984, or as you have to say in Spanish, 1984. Okay, so that's the difference between the two main past tenses, both in Spanish and in English. One uses have to say what you've done up until now, and that is called the present perfect. And then the other one says what you did at a specific time that is now finished, and that's called the simple past. Okay, so now that I've explained a little bit about why and when we use this tense, the simple past tense, I'm going to explain a little bit about the forms before I give you all of the forms. So for the forms of this tense, there are two important things to remember, okay? In the present tense, the simple present tense, the stress is always on the second last syllable unless there is an accent to tell you otherwise. For this tense, some of the forms, they have the stress on the final syllable and not the second last one, okay? So that's an important thing, and the forms that have the stress on the last syllable, they will always have an accent in the writing to show you that the stress is on the final syllable and not the second last one. The other thing to keep in mind with this tense is in the present tense we have three sets of endings. We have the endings for AR verbs, the endings for ER verbs, and the endings for IR verbs. But with this tense, there are only two sets of endings, one for AR verbs, and then for the other set, ER and IR verbs have exactly the same endings. So there's no change this time. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the forms for, first of all, with the AR verbs, and then secondly for the ER and IR verbs. I'm going to use, like my previous videos, I'm going to use specific verbs as a kind of model for all of the forms, and then I'll try to do some examples with other verbs. So I'm going to start with the verb trabajar, okay, to work, because trabajar, very common verb that you might use in the past to say, I worked yesterday, I worked last week, I worked last month, for example. So I'm going to start with this verb. So, trabajar, as I said earlier, we require the stem. So we take off the AR, and that leaves us with trabaj, T-R-A-B-A-J, okay? And onto that trabaj, we add our endings. So, the ending for the yo form, I worked, is the letter E with an accent. So, I worked is trabajé, okay? And you can hear there that it's not trabaje, it's trabajé. The stress is on the final syllable this time. So in the yo form in this tense, the stress is always on the final syllable. Okay, so I worked, trabajé. You worked, anyone you would address as to, so informal version of you. The ending is aste. So A-S-T-E, and the full form of that is trabajaste. You worked. Or of course it's the same for a question, so did you work? So trabajaste ayer? Did you work yesterday? So we have trabajé and trabajaste. For the él, ella and usted form, we have the stress on the final syllable, and the ending for this form, to say he worked, she worked, or you, usted, worked, is o. O with a stress in writing and a stress in speaking as well. So it's trabajó. Okay, trabajó. Now, if you remember your present tense endings, you'll know that that o is also an ending in the present tense, but it's not the ending for he and she, it's the ending for I. And this is why you have to get the stress in the correct place, because if you put the stress in the wrong place, you are going to confuse your listener. Trabajo, with the stress on the a, trabajo means I work, or I am working, or I do work. Trabajó means he worked, she worked, or you, usted, worked. So make sure you practice those pairs of words and getting the stress in the correct place. As you know, if you watch my videos regularly, I'm a fan of rehearsing verb endings. So make sure you practice these. Trabajo, trabajó. Trabajo, trabajó. Okay, so please make sure you practice that because the stress must be in the correct place. To say we worked, the good news here is we worked and we work or we are working are exactly the same. So it's trabajamos. So that amos ending is the same in both the simple past tense, the tense we're doing now, and the simple present tense. So for AR verbs, there's no difference in the we form, in the nosotros form. And then to say yous all work, or all of you work, or both of you work, the vosotros form of this verb, it's quite tricky, okay? So the ending is hasteis, okay? And people find that really difficult to say, okay? But the EI, so the spelling is hasteis, A-S-T-E-I-S, hasteis. And the way to think about the pronunciation of this is the E and the I, the last three letters, E-I-S, the E and the I are one sound. It's not E, it's A. Okay, A. Trabajasteis. Trabajasteis. So if you think back to the to form of the verb, that was haste. Okay, A-S-T-E. And with the use form, the vosotros form, it's haste, and then add on is to the end of it. So hasteis, trabajasteis. Okay, it's quite tricky, so practice that pronunciation. Trabajasteis. And then finally, for they did something for the AR verbs, the ending is aron. Okay, so think of it as just like the infinitive of the verb, trabajar, and then you add on onto the end. Trabajaron. Okay, is they worked. Okay, so I'm going to go through that verb in order. Trabajé, I worked. Trabajaste, you worked. Trabajó, with the stress on the O. He worked, she worked, or you, usted, worked. Trabajamos, we worked. Trabajasteis, yous worked, or all of you worked. Trabajaron, they worked. Okay, so that is the pattern for AR verbs in this simple past tense. Trabajé, trabajaste, trabajó. Trabajamos, trabajasteis, trabajaron. So let's think of another few AR verbs. Let's use hablar, another very common one. Hablé, I spoke, with the stress on the A. Hablé. Hablaste, habló, again with the stress on the O. Habló. Hablamos, hablasteis, hablaron. Pasar is another common verb. So pasé, pasaste, pasó, pasamos, pasasteis, pasaron. And those are the endings for AR verbs in the simple past tense. Haste, o, amos, hasteis, aron. Okay, so now that I've talked about the AR verbs, I want to move on to the ER and IR verbs. And as I explained earlier, ER and IR verbs in this tense, they share the same endings. There's no difference as there is in the present tense. I'm going to start with an ER verb. So I'm going to start with comer, very common verb, and one you might use quite a lot in the simple past tense to say I ate, you ate, he ate, and so on. So with the yo form, so again we're starting with com, okay, we take off the er and then add our endings onto com. So with the yo ending, it is the letter I with an accent, pronounced E. Okay, and again we have the stress on the final syllable this time. So not the second last one, but the final syllable. So it's commi, C-O-M with C-O-M-I with an accent, commi. The to form for comer, to say you ate, it is comiste. Okay, so not aste this time, but comiste. I-S-T-E, comiste. For he ate, she ate, and you ate, él, ella, and usted, the ending is I, O with an accent. Okay, and that accent on the letter O tells you that the stress is on the O. So the sound of this ending, because of the letter I, is more like yo. Okay, comme yo. Comme yo. So, and that is he ate, she ate, or you, usted, ate. Okay. For ER and IR verbs, as I said earlier, they share the same endings. And in the present tense, we eat or we are eating is comemos with an E, emos. But this time it's with an I, comimos. Okay. So what that means is that in this tense, for nosotros, for we did something, the AR ending and the IR ending are exactly the same as the present tense, but the ER ending changes ever so slightly. So it's not emos as it is in the present tense, it's imos, I-M-O-S. So we ate, comimos, comimos. Use ate, the ending is istais, istais, comistais. Okay, so would be use ate. Now, this is a little bit tricky to pronounce, so make sure you rehearse the pronunciation of this. It's istais, I-S-T-E-I-S, and again, the E-I-S at the end is one sound, it's ice, okay? The same as it was for the AR verbs. And this time we have the same rule as before. So let's start with the to form, you ate, comiste. And then to get the use form, or the all of you form, vosotros, we simply add on is to iste. So comiste, comistais. And then finally, for they ate, it's hieron, I-E-R-O-N. So comieron, that would be they ate. Okay, so the full verb would be comí, I ate, comiste, you ate, comió, he, she, or you, usted, ate, comimos, we ate, comistais, yous ate, and comieron, they ate. And then, as I said earlier, for IR verbs, let's use vivir, okay, to live. We have exactly the same endings. So, vivi, I ate, viviste, sorry, not I ate, I lived. Vivi, I lived, viviste, you lived, vivió, he or she or usted lived, vivimos, we lived. But again, that's also the same in the present tense. So we live or we are living is also vivimos. So again, like with the AR verbs, we have no difference between the present tense and this simple past tense. So vivimos, we lived. Vivistais, yous lived. Vivieron, they lived. So vivi, viviste, vivió. Vivimos, vivistais, vivieron. Okay. And that's the regular verbs in this simple past. So I'm going to do, just to finish, I'm going to do another ER verb and another IR verb. So I'll start with another ER verb. Again, very, very common. Beber. Okay, so I drank, bebi, with the stress on the E, bebi. You drank, bebiste. He or she or you, usted drank, bebió. We drank, bebimos. Yous drank, bebisteis. Sorry, I'll try that again. Bebisteis, because it's not ice, it's ice. Bebisteis. And they drank, bebieron. And then another IR verb, let's use permitir. So to allow, to permit. So I permitted, permití. You permitted, permitiste. He or she or you, usted, permitted, permitió. We permitted, permitimos. Yous permitted, permitisteis. And yous permitted, permitieron. Okay, so that's the endings, all of the endings for this tense. So for AR verbs, we have like hablar, we have hablé, hablaste, habló, hablamos, hablasteis, hablaron. For ER verbs, we have comí, comiste, comió, comimos, comisteis, comieron. And for IR verbs, we have viví, viviste, vivió, vivimos, vivisteis, vivieron. Okay, and that is a brief review of the simple past endings for AR, ER, and IR regular verbs, as well as a quick explanation of how we use them and when. In another video, I'll look at the irregular verbs. Irregular verbs, there are quite a lot of irregular verbs in this tense, but they do kind of mostly fall into different patterns. So I'll maybe do a couple of videos just on the different patterns of how we use irregular verbs in this tense. But that's everything for now. I hope you found this review very helpful. If you did, please share, like, or comment on the video. It really, really helps. So thank you very much and see you next time. Hasta luego.